Ambassador Krickstall's crystalline form vibrated with barely contained anxiety as he stood before the vast observation window of Station Prime. His four eyes, each capable of seeing across different spectrums of light, focused on the impossible sight before him. The human vessel hung in space like a metal mountain that had learned to fly, its hull stretching beyond the limits of what his mind could process as a single construct. Tactical analysis complete, Ambassador. His aide, a smaller Vraxian named Telk, chirped nervously from behind. The human vessel measures approximately 15 kilometers in length, 8 kilometers in width at its widest point, and 4 kilometers in height. Mass readings are, they're off our scales, sir. Krickstall's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The largest dreadnought in the Council's fleet, the pride of the Kelleran Empire, measured barely 2 kilometers. Without warning, without the telltale energy buildup that preceded any known form of faster-than-light travel, the massive vessel simply shifted. One moment, it hung motionless 30,000 kilometers from Station Prime. The next, it had halved the distance. No acceleración curve. No transition period. It moved like reality itself bent to accommodate its desires. Impossible, Telk breathed, his scales shifting to a pale green of fear. The energy requirements alone would power our entire civilization for a century, Krickstall finished. His mind raced through the implications. The Council had invited humanity to join their ranks after intercepting their crude radio signals from a distant arm of the galaxy. They had expected another minor species to uplift, another voice in their chorus of 10,000 worlds. What they got instead was this testament to a completely alien approach to technology. The communication panel chirped. A message from the human vessel, transmitted not through their primitive radio waves, but through the Council's own quantum entanglement network, a network that should have been impossible for them to access. Greetings, Ambassador Krickstall. The voice was pleasant, almost casual, speaking perfect Vraxian despite humanity having learned of their language mere weeks ago. I am Admiral Sarachun of the United Earth Stellar Navy vessel Prometheus. I believe we have an appointment to discuss humanity's membership in your Galactic Council. Krickstall found his voice with difficulty. Admiral Chun, yes, we were expecting you, though perhaps not in such a substantial vessel. A laugh came through the speakers, warm and genuinely amused. Ah yes, Prometheus is a bit much for a diplomatic mission, isn't she? But when you're traveling 40,000 light years from home, it pays to bring your own infrastructure. We're quite self-sufficient, I assure you. Self-sufficient. The word echoed in Krickstall's mind as his aide pulled up what limited scans they could manage. The readings were baffling. Entire ecosystems detected within the hull. Manufacturing capabilities that rivaled industrial worlds. Power signatures that suggested not one, but dozens of energy sources, each capable of outproducing a star. Admiral, if I may ask, Krickstall ventured carefully, what classification would you give to your vessel in your own naval structure? Another pause. When Admiral Chun spoke again, there was something in her tone. Not quite pride, but a matter-of-fact confidence that sent chills through Krickstall's exoskeleton. Prometheus is a Titan-class warship, Ambassador. One of 12 in active service. 12. They had 12 of these monstrosities. I see, Krickstall managed. And are all human vessels of similar scope? Oh no, Admiral Chun replied cheerfully. Most of our fleet consists of smaller vessels. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, the usual. The Titans are special projects. We built them after our first interstellar war. First interstellar war. The phrase hung in the air like a threat. The Council's intelligence had suggested humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. How could they have already fought interstellar wars? If I may be so bold, Telk interjected, forgetting protocol in his curiosity. Who did you fight? The pause this time was longer. When Admiral Chun spoke, the warmth had faded slightly from her voice. Ourselves, I'm afraid. Old Earth nations couldn't agree on who should control the colony worlds. It got messy. 20 billion dead before we finally united under one banner. The Titans were built to ensure it never happens again. Their existence makes rebellion impractical. Krickstall exchanged glances with his aide. A species that had nearly destroyed itself with internal conflicts, only to emerge with technology that defied comprehension. What kind of pressure forge had humanity emerged from? But That's all ancient history now, Admiral Chun continued, the warmth returning. We're united, we're peaceful, and we're very interested in joining your council. I have full diplomatic credentials and authority to negotiate on behalf of all human worlds. Shall we proceed with the scheduled meeting? Of course, Admiral, Crixtow replied, though his mind was already racing ahead to the emergency session he would need to call. We have prepared docking Bay 7 for your shuttle. No need for a shuttle, Ambassador. If you'll check your station sensors, you'll find I'm already aboard. The blood in Crixtow's veins turned to ice. He spun toward the security console, where Telk was frantically checking readings. They're in Conference Room Alpha, the most secure location on the entire station, protected by 12 layers of shielding and quantum encryption, stood a single human figure. She had appeared without triggering a single alarm, without opening a single door. Ow! Telk whispered. On the screen, Admiral Chun smiled and tapped what looked like a simple wristband. Quantum tunneling on a macroscopic scale. Another little innovation from our war years. Don't worry, I came alone, and I'm here in good faith. Shall we begin? I believe we have much to discuss about humanity's place in your council. Crixtow forced his legs to move, heading toward the conference room on autopilot. Behind him, he could hear Telk frantically sending encrypted messages to the council's emergency committee. The protocols for first contact scenarios had covered many possibilities: hostile species, incomprehensible aliens, machine intelligences, hive minds. But they had never prepared for this, a species that had arrived already more advanced than their supposed mentors, wearing a smile and asking politely to join the neighborhood association. As he walked, Crixtow couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had just shifted beneath his feet. The Prometheus hung outside their station like a sleeping giant, its hull unmarked by weapons ports, because, he realized with growing dread, when you could appear anywhere instantly, when you could move mountains through space with a thought, what need was there for something as crude as visible weapons? The conference room doors opened before him, and he found himself face-to-face with humanity's representative. Admiral Sarah Chun was smaller than he expected, standing perhaps 2 meters tall, with a bilateral symmetry common to many sapient species. Her hair was dark, streaked with premature gray, and her eyes, those eyes held the weight of someone who had seen civilizations burn. "Ambassador," she said, rising from her seat with a fluid grace that spoke of either genetic enhancement or generations of adaptation to varying gravities. "Thank you for meeting with me. I know our arrival method was unconventional, but we've learned that sometimes a little shock value helps establish honest dialogue." Crixtow settled his bulk into the chair designed for his species, noting how Admiral Chun had chosen a seat that put the massive view screen behind her, the one showing the impossibly vast hull of the Prometheus. "Admiral," he began carefully, "I must confess, your arrival has raised some concerns among the council members. A species capable of constructing vessels like the Prometheus, of achieving instantaneous transportation, of accessing our quantum networks without authorization. You must understand how this appears to us." She nodded, her expression serious. "I do understand, Ambassador. From your perspective, we're an unknown variable in an equation you thought you had solved. But I want to assure you, humanity has no interest in disrupting the peace you've built. We've learned the cost of war all too well. And yet you arrive in a warship," Crixtow pointed out. "The classification is historical," Chen replied. "Prometheus hasn't fired her weapons in anger in over 30 years. These days, she serves as more of a mobile embassy, a research platform, a colony support vessel. Her military capabilities are, well, they're there but dormant, like a nuclear reactor that generates power instead of explosions." The analogy was apt, if unsettling. Crixtow pulled up his prepared questions, though most seemed hopelessly inadequate now. "Perhaps," he suggested, "you could help us understand humanity better. Your technology appears to have developed along radically different lines from any council species. How did you achieve such advances in barely a century of interstellar capability?" Chen leaned back, and, for a moment, her carefully diplomatic mask slipped. "Desperation, Ambassador. Pure, existential desperation. When our colony ships first left Earth, they weren't the united effort of a species reaching for the stars. They were lifeboats fleeing a dying world. Every nation, every corporation, every religious group that could scrape together the resources threw together ships and fled to the stars. She gestured to the view screen, where technical specifications of the Prometheus flickered into existence, though Crixtal noted that most of the details were artfully obscured. When those colonies established themselves, old grudges came with them. The Chinese colonies remembered what the Americans had done during the Water Wars. The European Federation hadn't forgiven the African Union for the embargo during the food collapse. Mars remembered Earth's oppression. Everyone had weapons, everyone had grievances, and everyone was convinced they were humanity's rightful heirs. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as she continued. The war started over mining rights to a single asteroid. Within 6 months, it had spread to every human system. We fought with nuclear weapons, antimatter bombs, relativistic kill vehicles, automated war machines that consumed entire moons to build more of themselves. We deployed weapons that deleted information from reality, viruses that rewrote the fundamental constants of physics in localized areas, devices that... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Devices that we've since agreed never to speak of again. Crixtal felt his scales shifting involuntarily to a defensive pattern. And the Titans were built in the war's final years, Chen said quietly, when it became clear that we were approaching a point of no return. Either humanity united, or we would extinct ourselves. The Titans were constructed by a secret alliance of scientists and military leaders from all factions. 12 ships, each capable of ending civilization on any world they visited. Their existence was revealed simultaneously to all human factions with a simple message: unite under a common government, or watch the Titans enforce peace by removing anyone who continued fighting. A gun held to your own head, Telk murmured. Chen nodded. Exactly. It worked because everyone could do the math. A single Titan could withstand the combined assault of hundreds of conventional ships. 12 of them, working in concert, were unstoppable. Within a year, the United Earth Government was formed. Within 5 years, we had achieved true peace. The Titans became symbols of what we could accomplish together, instead of reminders of how close we came to ending ourselves. And now? Crixtal asked. Now we explore. We build. We grow. We've established colonies in 70 systems, built habitats that house billions, created art and science and wonders we never imagined when we were too busy trying to kill each other. And we've detected your council's presence. She leaned forward earnestly. 10,000 species working together. A galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest. It's everything we've hoped to find. Proof that we're not doomed to repeat our mistakes on a larger scale. Crixtal considered her words carefully. The story was both inspiring and terrifying. A species that had pulled itself back from extinction through the threat of mutual annihilation, emerging with technology that defied understanding. They wanted to join the council, but could the council survive their membership? Admiral Chun, he began slowly, what you've shared is illuminating. But you must understand the position this puts us in. The council maintains peace through a careful balance of power. No single species holds enough strength to dominate the others. Your Titans upset that balance entirely, Chen finished. Yes, we're aware. That's why I'm authorized to make certain proposals. Technology sharing agreements. Limitations on Titan deployments. Integration protocols that ensure humanity becomes part of your system rather than an outside force acting upon it. She touched her wristband again, and holographic documents appeared before Crixtal. Thousands of pages of carefully prepared proposals, treaties, and agreements. We've studied your charter, Ambassador. We understand the principles that have guided the Council for 10 millennia. We don't want to break what you've built. We want to strengthen it. Imagine what could be accomplished if humanity's innovations were combined with the Council's wisdom and stability. Crixtal found himself studying the human woman with new eyes. Behind the diplomatic words and careful proposals, he saw something else, a desperate hope. Humanity had achieved technological supremacy, but at a cost that had scarred their collective psyche. They sought the Council not as conquerors, but as a species looking for redemption, for proof that power didn't always corrupt, that strength could serve peace rather than war. These proposals, he said finally, they would need to be reviewed by the full Council. The emergency session has already been called. Chun smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. Of course, we're prepared to wait. Prometheus will remain at the designated coordinates, and I'll stay aboard your station as a gesture of good faith. We've waited this long to find others among the stars. We can wait a little longer to do this right. As the formal diplomatic protocols began, Crixtal couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would be remembered as a turning point in galactic history. Humanity had arrived not as conquerors or supplicants, but as something far more dangerous, equals who had surpassed their teachers before they'd even met. The real question was whether the Council could adapt to accommodate them, or whether the careful balance of 10,000 years was about to shatter against the hull of humanity's titans. Outside, the Prometheus waited in silence, a monument to humanity's darkest hour and brightest triumph. Aboard Station Prime, representatives of 10,000 species began to gather, called by emergency summons to address a simple question that had suddenly become existentially complex. What do you do when the children you thought to guide have already surpassed you? The debates would be fierce, the fear palpable, the possibilities endless. But in that moment, in Conference Room Alpha, an ambassador of the Old Order and an admiral of the New sat across from each other, building the first fragile bridge between what was and what might be. The universe, Crixtal reflected, would never be quite the same. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had witnessed 10,000 years of deliberation, but never had it felt so small. Designed to accommodate representatives from every member species, the vast spherical chamber with its floating platforms and adjustable environments normally inspired awe in newcomers. Today, it felt like a cage containing 10,000 nervous animals, all acutely aware of the predator that had wandered into their midst. High Chancellor Vorix centered himself on the primary platform, his ancient Etherian form flickering between states of matter as his emotional control wavered. Around him, arranged in the traditional spiral pattern that symbolized the Council's unity, floated the platforms of the major powers. The Kellerans with their militant pride, the Scythians with their vast trade networks, the machine intelligence of the collective humming with calculated concern, and dozens more, each species a pillar of the galactic order that had endured since before humanity had discovered fire. The emergency session is called to order, Vorix intoned, his voice carrying across the chamber through both audio waves and psychic resonance. Single item agenda, the human application for membership, and the implications of their technological capabilities. Before he could continue, Platform 73 flared with harsh orange light. The Kelleran Supreme Commander, Thax, rose to his full 3-meter height, combat spines fully extended. Implications? Thax snarled. High Chancellor, with respect, we are not here to discuss implications. We are here to discuss an existential threat to everything the Council represents. The humans possess planet-killer technology that makes our entire combined fleet obsolete. They must be disarmed or expelled from our space immediately. A ripple of agreement and dissent washed through the chamber. Platform 91 pulsed with the soft blue of the Scythian delegation. Their speaker, a gelatinous being whose form constantly shifted to express emotion, shaped itself into patterns of reconciliation. The Kelleran speaks from fear. The Scythian burbled melodiously. Yes, the humans possess great power, but they come offering trade, knowledge, peaceful integration. Will we turn away such potential because we fear being surpassed? Is our unity so fragile? Unity built on balanced power. The collective interjected from Platform 12, their 1,000 voices speaking as one through mechanical speakers. Statistical analysis indicates human Titan-class vessels could defeat our combined fleets with 97.3% probability. No previous member has possessed such disproportionate strength. Integration protocols insufficient for this scenario. Vorix raised a tendril for silence, feeling the weight of millennia on his gaseous form. He had led the Council for the last 1,000 years, guided them through crises that had seemed insurmountable at the time. But this was different. Ambassador Crixtal, he called, you have spent the most time with the human representative. Share your observations. Crixtal's platform rose from the observer ring to the speaker's position. The Vraxian had shed his diplomatic scales, revealing the honest grays of deep concern beneath. Honored Council, he began, I have spent the last 6 hours in discussion with Admiral Chun. What I have learned is both reassuring and deeply troubling. The humans do not seek conquest. Their history is one of near self-extinction through internal conflict. They come to us seeking stability, seeking to be part of something greater than themselves. Pretty words, Thax growled. But their ship remains. Their weapons remain. What happens when they decide our stability isn't to their liking? When they judge us as they judged their own kind during their wars? Crickstow's mandibles clicked nervously. The Admiral has shared proposals, technology exchanges, limitations on Titan deployments. They offer to teach us their quantum tunneling technology, their power generation methods. In return, they ask for membership and the right to establish embassies in our systems. A conqueror's bargain. Platform 45 crackled with electrical discharge as the storm being Zephix manifested. They offer trinkets while keeping their true power. We would be fools to accept. The debate raged for hours. Species that had been allies for millennia found themselves on opposite sides. The militaristic factions, led by the Kellerans, pushed for immediate action, either forced disarmament or a preemptive strike while the humans were still isolated. The progressive factions, championed by the Scythians and several younger species, argued for cautious engagement and the potential benefits of human technology. The neutral factions, including the ancient Etherians and the logic-driven machine intelligences, sought more information before committing to any path. Through it all, Vorix noticed something troubling. The fear in the chamber wasn't just about human military might. It was existential. For 10,000 years, the Council had represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. They were the teachers, the guides, the wise elders who brought younger species into the fold. The humans hadn't just arrived with bigger guns. They had arrived having already solved problems the Council still struggled with. Enough. Vorix finally declared, his form expanding to fill a significant portion of the central space. We circle the same arguments like scavengers around a corpse. We need more information. I propose we invite Admiral Chun to address the Council directly. The chamber erupted. No non-member had ever been allowed to speak in the Grand Assembly. The precedent was staggering. You would give the predator a voice in the herd. Thax roared. I would hear from humans themselves what they seek, Vorix replied calmly. We make decisions based on fear and speculation. Let us base them on facts instead. The vote was closer than any in recent memory. 5,847 in favor, for 1,153 against. The narrow majority spoke volumes about the division humanity had already created simply by existing. Admiral Chun entered the Grand Assembly 20 minutes later, and the chamber fell silent. She was so small compared to most of the species present, a bipedal figure that many could have crushed without effort. Yet she walked with a confidence that made her seem larger, and the simple device on her wrist, the one that could apparently transport her anywhere instantly, gleamed like a threat. She took her position at the center of the chamber, where petitioners traditionally stood. But instead of the usual nervous energy of those seeking the Council's favor, she stood with the calm of someone who had faced worse odds. Honored representatives, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I thank you for this opportunity to address you directly. I understand the fear our arrival has caused. I understand the disruption we represent to your established order. And I come before you not to minimize those concerns, but to acknowledge them and offer a path forward that benefits all. She touched her wristband, and holographic images filled the space above her, not of weapons or warships, but of worlds. Dozens of them. Human colonies that sprawled across their planets like living art, orbital habitats that defied conventional engineering, and installations that merged so seamlessly with their environments they seemed to have grown rather than been built. This is what humanity has done with our technology when not driven by war, Chun continued. We have created homes for 20 billion souls. We have restored dead worlds to life, built cities in the void between stars, created wonders that our ancestors could never have imagined. And we have done it all in less than a century since our unification. The images shifted, showing human medical technology, regrowing limbs, human agricultural methods, feeding billions with minimal space, human educational systems that could download knowledge directly to the brain. We offer to share this knowledge, Chun said. Not the weapons. We've learned too well what happens when destructive power spreads without wisdom, but the tools of creation, of growth, of prosperity. Imagine what 10,000 species could accomplish with these capabilities. Platform 18 rose slightly, and the melodious voice of the Lyrian harmony spoke. And what of your warships, Admiral? What are these titans that could destroy us all? Chen's expression hardened slightly. The titans will remain. I won't lie to you about that. They're not just weapons to us. They're the guardians that ended our civil war, the symbols of our unity. To decommission them would be to risk everything we've built. But she paused, ensuring she had everyone's attention. We are willing to accept oversight. Council observers on each Titan. Transparency in their deployments. Treaty obligations that would require Council approval for any military action beyond self-defense. And if we refuse, Fax challenged from his platform. If we demand you leave our space. She met his gaze steadily. Then, we would be disappointed. We would return to our region of space and continue our development alone. But ask yourselves, is that what you want? A humanity that grows in isolation, without the wisdom of your millennia of peaceful cooperation, without the bonds that might ensure we remain friends rather than become strangers. The implicit threat was masterfully delivered, not of war, but of lost opportunity and future uncertainty. A humanity integrated into the Council could be influenced, guided, perhaps even controlled. A humanity developing alone in the dark might emerge in a century as something far more dangerous. You speak of wisdom, the collective interjected. Yet your rapid advancement suggests you have found shortcuts our scientists have missed. How can we trust technology we don't understand? Chen smiled slightly. Because you will understand it. We propose a 50-year integration period. Joint research teams. Technology transfers at a pace that allows for full comprehension and safe implementation. We didn't achieve our breakthroughs through impossible genius. We achieved them through desperation and a willingness to think beyond conventional limitations. Given time, every species here could replicate what we've done. Orcs studied the human carefully. There was truth in her words, but also calculation. The humans knew their position was strong. They could afford to be generous because their generosity cost them little. Even if the Council eventually matched their technology, humanity would have spent those decades advancing even further. Admiral Chun, Vorik spoke carefully. You offer much, but you must understand our position. The Council has maintained peace through balance. Your species upsets that balance dramatically. How can we integrate you without destroying what we've built? Chen nodded thoughtfully. High Chancellor, I believe the question you're really asking is, how can the Council evolve to remain relevant in a universe where humanity exists? And that's a fair question. The answer, I believe, is that the Council must become more than a military alliance or a trade confederation. It must become a true civilization, united not by balance of power, but by shared purpose. She gestured again, and new images appeared, speculative designs for megastructures that would require the cooperation of dozens of species, exploration vessels that could reach neighboring galaxies, theoretical technologies that even humanity couldn't achieve alone. We don't want to dominate the Council, Chen said firmly. We want to challenge it, to push all of us beyond what we thought possible. Yes, we arrive with power, but we offer to use that power in service of something greater. A galactic civilization that doesn't just maintain peace, but actively builds wonders. That doesn't just prevent extinction, but ensures flourishing. The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. It was a vision both inspiring and terrifying. The comfortable stability of 10 millennia replaced by rapid change and unknown possibilities. Platform 207 rose, a minor species called the Quell, known for their philosophical wisdom despite their limited military might. Their speaker, a crystalline being that chimed thoughts rather than spoke them, resonated through the chamber. The human speaks of evolution, the Quell sang. Perhaps that is what we face. Not invasion, but metamorphosis. The question is not whether we can prevent change, but whether we guide it or are swept away by it. The observation sparked new debate, less heated, but more profound. Some species began to see opportunity where they had seen only threat. Others dug deeper into their fears, convinced that any change to their ancient order would lead to chaos. Admiral Chun stood patiently through it all, occasionally answering questions, but mostly letting the council wrestle with the implications of humanity's existence. She had delivered her message and made her offer. The rest was up to them. As the hours wore on, factions began to solidify. The progressives, now calling themselves the Integration Coalition, argued for conditional acceptance of humanity with strong oversight mechanisms. The hardliners, led by the Kellerans, demanded either human disarmament or exclusion. The moderates sought compromise, perhaps a limited membership or a probationary period with restricted access to council resources. Through it all, Vorix began to see the truth that Chun had hinted at. The council's response to humanity would define its future more than humanity itself. They could choose fear and potentially create an enemy of unimaginable power, or they could choose hope and potentially gain an ally that could elevate them all. But choosing hope meant accepting a fundamental shift in the galactic order. It meant acknowledging that the era of the Council as the sole arbiters of civilization was ending. It meant stepping into an uncertain future where humanity's raw power would exist alongside their ancient wisdom. The debate raged on, but Vorix had already made his decision. The Council would have to evolve or risk becoming obsolete. The only question was whether they would do so gracefully or be dragged kicking and screaming into a new age. As he watched Admiral Chun field yet another hostile question with diplomatic grace, he couldn't help but wonder if the humans had planned this all along. Had they known their mere existence would force the Council to confront its own limitations? Had they arrived not as conquerors, but as catalysts, wielding change itself as their most potent weapon? The universe, Vorix reflected, had become a far more interesting and dangerous place the moment humanity had announced itself. And despite his fears, despite the very real possibility that everything he had worked to preserve might crumble, he found himself curious about what would come next. The session would continue for days. Arguments would be made and remade. Alliances would shift like stellar dust. But in that moment, watching a single human woman stand unbowed before the assembled might of 10,000 civilizations, Vorix knew that the old age was ending. What emerged from its ashes would depend entirely on the choices made in this chamber, by beings who had thought themselves the masters of the galaxy, only to discover they were merely its caretakers, waiting unknowingly for the arrival of a species that would force them to become something more. Commander Thax's war fleet hung in perfect formation around the designated coordinates, a display of Kelleran military precision meant to send a clear message. 800 vessels, from nimble frigates to mighty dreadnoughts, created a sphere of overlapping fire zones that could vaporize a small moon. It was the largest peacetime deployment in 3 centuries, and only half of what Thax had wanted to bring. Supreme Commander, his tactical officer reported, antenna twitching with barely suppressed excitement. All vessels report weapons charged and ready. If the humans show any sign of aggression, they won't, Thax interrupted, though he kept his own doubts carefully hidden. They're too clever for that. This Admiral Chun plays a longer game. 3 days had passed since Chen's address to the Council. 3 days of bitter debate that had nearly torn their ancient alliance apart. In the end, High Chancellor Vorix had proposed what he called a practical demonstration. The humans would showcase their Titan's capabilities in a controlled environment, allowing the Council to better understand what they were dealing with. The location was carefully chosen. The Deadland Sector, a region of space littered with the remnants of an ancient war, far from any inhabited systems. The progressives had seen it as an opportunity to witness human technology firsthand. The moderates viewed it as necessary intelligence gathering. But Thax and his hardline faction had seen it for what it truly was, a chance to gauge whether the Council's combined might stood any chance against a Titan-class vessel, which was why he had brought 800 ships instead of the agreed-upon 100. Quantum signature detected, the sensor officer announced. Single vessel, matching the profile of the human ship Prometheus. Space rippled like water disturbed by a thrown stone. Where there had been nothing, suddenly there was everything. The Prometheus didn't arrive. It simply existed, as if it had always been there and reality had only just noticed. The massive vessel hung motionless, its hull drinking in light like a piece of void given form. Even prepared for it. Even having seen the recordings, Thax felt his combat spines retract involuntarily. His fleet's 800 ships, arranged in their perfect sphere, suddenly looked like insects surrounding a mountain. Admiral Chun sends greetings, the communications officer reported, his voice carefully neutral. She notes that we seem to have brought more observers than agreed upon, and hopes this doesn't indicate a lack of trust in humanity's peaceful intentions. The dry humor in the message wasn't lost on Thax. They had been caught in their deception immediately, and Chun was choosing to treat it as a minor social faux pas rather than the aggressive posturing it was. Tell the Admiral that the Kelleran Empire takes its observation duties seriously, Thax replied. We wish to ensure we could provide comprehensive analysis for the Council. Of course, Chen's voice came through directly this time, warm with amusement. I'm sure that's all it is. Well, since you brought so many observers, we should probably give you something worth observing. Hi, Chancellor Vorix. Are you monitoring? I am here, Admiral. Vorix's voice joined the channel, broadcast from the council chamber where thousands of representatives watched through sensor feeds. You may proceed with your demonstration when ready. Thank you, Chancellor. First, let me address the obvious question on everyone's mind. Weapons capability. Commander Thax, I notice your fleet has weapons charged. Would you like to see our defensive systems first? Thax's mandibles clicked in surprise. You would reveal your defenses to us? Why not? We're applying to be allies, not enemies. Besides, and here Chen's voice carried a hint of steel, I think it's important you understand that aggression against a Titan is inadvisable. Without warning, space around the Prometheus began to shift. What Thax had taken for empty void revealed itself to be filled with something, a distortion field that bent light and sensors alike. His tactical displays screamed warnings as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Dimensional shielding, Chen explained casually. We learned during our wars that conventional shields, no matter how strong, can be overwhelmed with enough firepower. So we stopped trying to block attacks and started making sure they never reach us in the first place. The space around Prometheus exists slightly out of phase with normal reality. Energy weapons, projectiles, even antimatter, it all passes through without touching us. To demonstrate, a small drone launched from the Prometheus and fired a modest laser burst at the Titan's hull. The beams simply vanished, not absorbed or deflected, but ceasing to exist in the same dimensional space as its target. Impossible, Thax's science officer breathed. The power requirements alone are substantial, yes, Chen agreed, but manageable with our quantum tap reactors. Of course, shields alone don't win battles. Sometimes you need to reach out and touch someone. The Prometheus's hull remained smooth, unmarked by obvious weapons ports. Then, without any visible preparation, beams of light began to emanate from the ship, not from specific points, but from the entire hull simultaneously, as if the Titan itself had become a weapon. Ancient derelict ships throughout the Deadlands began to vanish. Not explode, not melt, simply cease to exist, deleted from reality with surgical precision. Thousands of targets, some separated by millions of kilometers, all removed in perfect synchronization. Coherent gravity manipulation, Chen noted, as if discussing the weather. We can create microscopic singularities at any point within a 50 million kilometer radius. Useful for clearing debris, mining operations, or... She let the implications hang. Thax watched his tactical officers try to process what they were seeing. There were no beam travels times to calculate, no projectile trajectories to track. The Prometheus could simply decide something should stop existing, and it did. His entire fleet, for all its firepower, was effectively sitting inside the Titan's weapons range with no way to prevent it from deleting them at will. Of course, Chen continued, sometimes subtlety isn't what's called for. Sometimes you need to make a statement. The Prometheus began to move. Despite its massive size, it accelerated like a fighter craft, reaching significant fractions of light speed in seconds. But, more unnervingly, it wasn't following Newtonian physics. The ship would be moving in one direction, then, suddenly, be moving in another without any transition, as if inertia was a suggestion rather than a law. Localized space-time manipulation, Chen explained as the Titan performed maneuvers that should have torn any ship apart. We don't move through space so much as move space around us. It's quite energy efficient once you have the right equations. The demonstration continued for an hour. The Prometheus showed capabilities that made the Council's most advanced technologies look like stone tools. It created temporary wormholes, allowing instant communication across galactic distances. It demonstrated manufacturing capabilities, consuming asteroid debris and converting it into finished products in minutes. It even showed what Chun called temporal shielding, the ability to slightly accelerate or decelerate time in localized areas, effectively allowing the ship to react faster than should be possible. Through it all, Thax felt his military certainty crumbling. He had brought 800 ships to send a message of strength. Instead, he had discovered that his entire fleet existed at the Prometheus' sufferance. If Admiral Chun decided to end them, there was literally nothing they could do to prevent it. Now, Chun said as the demonstration wound down, I want to show you something else. Something that I think is far more important than our weapons. The Prometheus moved to a particularly dense field of debris, the remnants of what had once been a space station, destroyed in whatever ancient conflict had created the Deadlands. Instead of weapons fire, the Titan extended what looked like gossamer threads of light, thousands of them, reaching out to embrace the wreckage. The debris began to move, not randomly, but with purpose. Pieces fitted together like a three-dimensional puzzle. Metal flowed like liquid, reshaping itself. Within minutes, where there had been nothing but ancient destruction, a new structure emerged, a perfect replica of what the station had once been, restored from ruin to pristine condition. We can destroy, Chun said quietly, but we prefer to build. This technology, controlled matter reformation at the molecular level, is what we offer the Council. Imagine what could be done with it. Dead worlds brought back to life. Ancient damage repaired. A galaxy not just maintained, but renewed. Thax found himself staring at the restored station, its lights now twinkling like stars. In all his years of military service, he had become expert at destruction. But this was creation on a scale he had never imagined possible. Commander Thax, Chun addressed him directly. I know you came here expecting to find an enemy, someone you would eventually have to fight. But I hope what you've seen today shows you that fighting us would be not just futile, but wasteful. We have no interest in conquering the Council. We want to join it to strengthen it, to help it become something greater. And if we refuse, Thax asked, the question coming out more quietly than he intended. Then, we'll be disappointed, Chun replied. We'll return to our space and continue developing. In 100 years, or 200, or 1,000, our peoples will meet again. And who knows what humanity will have become by then, shaped by isolation rather than cooperation. Wouldn't it be better to shape that future together? High Chancellor Vorix's voice entered the conversation. Admiral Chun, your demonstration has been illuminating. I believe the Council has much to discuss. Of course, Chancellor. Prometheus will remain here for another day if any representatives wish to visit in person. We're quite proud of our Arboretum. We've preserved species from Earth that exist nowhere else now. Sometimes it's good to remember what we're trying to protect, not just what we're capable of destroying. As the channel closed, Thax stared at the massive ship floating serenely among his fleet. His tactical officer was running simulations, trying to find any weakness, any strategy that might work against such overwhelming technological superiority. But Thax already knew what the results would be. Stand down weapons, he ordered quietly. Commander, his second-in-command's voice carried surprise. Stand down weapons, Thax repeated more firmly. All ships. We're not here as enemies today. As his fleet powered down their arms, Thax contemplated what he had witnessed. The humans hadn't just demonstrated military might. They had shown the obsolescence of military might itself. When you could delete threats from existence, when you could move faster than cause and effect, when you could rebuild faster than anyone could destroy, traditional warfare became meaningless. The real power they had demonstrated wasn't in their weapons, but in their restraint. They could have conquered the galaxy already if they wished. Instead, they were asking permission to join it. Commander, his communications officer spoke up. Admiral Chun is asking if you would like to visit the Prometheus personally. She says she'd be honored to show a fellow military officer their tactical systems. Thax's instincts screamed at him that entering that ship would be suicide. But his curiosity, The part of him that had always wanted to understand rather than simply destroy won out. "Tell the Admiral I accept her invitation," he said, "and prepare my shuttle." As he prepared to board humanity's Titan, Thax realized the universe had changed. The question now was whether he and the Council could change with it, or whether they would cling to the old ways until they became as obsolete as the debris floating in the Deadlands. Later, standing in the Prometheus's observation deck, looking out at a view that seemed to bend reality itself, Thax would find himself face to face with Admiral Chun. She was smaller than him by half, physically fragile by Kelleran standards. But the weight of what her species had accomplished, the terrible responsibility of power beyond measure, sat on her shoulders like armor. "We were like you once," she told him quietly, as they watched his fleet through windows that showed more than just visible light. Convinced that strength meant weapons, that security meant the ability to destroy threats. It took us nearly ending ourselves to learn that true strength is the ability to create, to preserve, to choose not to destroy even when you can. "And if someone forces your hand?" Thax asked. Chen's expression hardened, and, for a moment, Thax glimpsed the steel beneath her diplomatic exterior. "Then, we remind them why the Titans were built. But it hasn't come to that in 30 years, and if we do this right, it never will again." As Thax returned to his flagship, his mind churned with new possibilities. The demonstration had achieved its purpose, but not in the way anyone had expected. It hadn't shown the Council whether they could fight the humans. It had shown them that fighting itself might be obsolete in the world humanity was offering to build. The real question was whether the Council had the wisdom to accept that offer, or whether fear would drive them to create the very enemy they sought to prevent. The research station Synthesis floated at the edge of Council space, a gleaming testament to 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge. Within its vast archives and laboratories, the greatest minds of 100 species worked to unlock the mysteries of a universe. It was here, in a neutral ground of pure science, that the first joint Human Council research teams would convene. Dr. Keela Eswenen of the Altari floated in the main conference chamber, her bioluminescent skin flickering with nervous patterns. As lead physicist for the Council's Advanced Sciences Division, she had spent the last week reviewing the preliminary data the humans had shared. Each page had been a revelation. Each equation had challenged fundamental assumptions she had held for centuries. Around her, 24 of the Council's finest scientists gathered, the crystalline mathematicians of Quell, the quantum theorists from the Machine Collective, the legendary bioengineers of HFY. They had been chosen not just for their brilliance, but for their ability to adapt, to think beyond their species' traditional paradigms. They would need every bit of that flexibility for what was coming. The human delegation arrived precisely on time, though their method of arrival sent ripples of unease through the assembled scientists. There was no shuttle dock, no transport beam. One moment the spaces were empty. The next, 6 humans stood there, the faint shimmer around them, the only indication of the impossible journey they had just completed. Leading them was Dr. Marcus Chun. No relation to the Admiral, he would quickly clarify with a smile. Where Admiral Chun carried herself with military precision, Marcus moved with the distracted air of someone whose mind was always partially elsewhere, solving problems in dimensions others couldn't perceive. "Colleagues," he began, his enthusiasm palpable, "thank you for this opportunity. What we're about to share isn't just human science. It's the culmination of perspectives born from extremity. When you're trying to prevent your species from extinction, you learn to question everything, including the nature of reality itself." He gestured, and holographic displays filled the space between them. Not the simple three-dimensional projections the Council used, but something that hurt to look at directly, information displayed in more dimensions than most species could properly process. "Let's start with the fundamentals," Marcus continued. "Your sciences are built on understanding the universe as it presents itself. Observe, theorize, test, refine. It's produced wonders over millennia. But what happens when observation itself is the limiting factor?" The Quell mathematician chimed forward. "You speak of the observer effect in quantum mechanics. This is well understood. With respect," Marcus interrupted gently. "You understand one interpretation of it. During our wars, we discovered something else. The observer effect isn't just about measurement collapsing quantum states. It's about consciousness interfacing with the fundamental information substrate of reality. The room fell silent. What he was suggesting bordered on mysticism, yet the equations flowing across the displays were rigorous, mathematical, testable. Dr. Syn forced herself to speak. You're saying consciousness affects reality beyond the quantum level? I'm saying consciousness is reality at the quantum level, Marcus replied. Everything else, matter, energy, space, time, these are emergent properties of information organizing itself. And once you understand that, once you truly accept it, you can begin to manipulate that information directly. To demonstrate, he held out his hand. Above his palm, a sphere of perfect silver materialized. Not transported, not manufactured, created from nothing, but the conscious reorganization of quantum information into the pattern of matter. Impossible, breathed the Scythian bioengineer. The energy requirements are zero, Marcus finished. We're not creating matter from energy. We're convincing the universe that matter was already there. The only energy required is for the computational process of reorganization. The implications crash through the room like a tsunami. If matter could be created from pure information, if consciousness could directly affect reality, this is how your weapons work. The collective realized, their 1,000 voices harmonizing in sudden understanding. You don't destroy things. You edit them out of existence. Marcus nodded solemnly. The same principle, yes. Though we learned the hard way that just because you can delete something doesn't mean you should. The universe has a memory, and careless editing has consequences. He waved his hand, and the displays shifted to show historical data from humanity's wars. Entire regions of space where physics worked differently, where cause and effect had broken down, where reality itself had been wounded by weapons that attacked the information substrate directly. The scar zones, Marcus said quietly. 57 regions where we damaged space-time so badly it still hasn't healed. Ships that enter them sometimes emerge before they went in. Sometimes they emerge changed, their crew replaced by versions from alternate probability streams. Sometimes they don't emerge at all. The assembled scientists stared at the data in horrified fascination. The humans hadn't just developed ultimate weapons. They had learned why such weapons should never be used. But from that horror came understanding. Marcus continued, his tone brightening. If we could wound reality, we could also heal it. If we could delete, we could also create. The same technologies that nearly ended us became the tools of our transformation. The next hours were a whirlwind of revelation. The humans shared insights that made the Council's most advanced theories look like nursery rhymes. They demonstrated technologies that bent or broke what the Council considered fundamental laws, temporal mechanics that allowed localized time manipulation without paradox. The key, Marcus explained, was understanding that time wasn't a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean with currents that could be navigated. Dimensional engineering that could create pocket universes, each with their own physical laws. The Titans didn't just carry weapons. They carried entire reality bubbles where the rules could be rewritten as needed. Consciousness transfer protocols that allowed human minds to exist as pure information, backed up and restored at will. Death, for humanity, had become an inconvenience rather than an ending. With each revelation, Dr. Syn felt her worldview crumbling and reforming. The Altari had spent millennia perfecting fusion reactors, only to learn the humans drew power directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Her people's greatest achievement in material science, programmable matter that could shift between three states, paled before human materials that existed in superposition, being multiple things simultaneously until needed. I have to ask, she finally said during a break. Why share this? You could have kept these secrets, maintained your advantage indefinitely. Marcus smiled sadly. Because we've learned what happens when knowledge is hoarded. Our war started because different factions developed different technologies and tried to use them for dominance. The only way to ensure that never happens again is to spread knowledge as widely as possible. Besides, his expression brightened. Imagine what your people might discover with these tools. We've had them for less than a century. You have perspectives shaped by millennia. The innovations you'll create will surpass anything we've imagined. The Quell mathematician had been silent for the last hour, their crystalline form resonating at frequencies that indicated deep thought. Now they spoke, their chimes carrying overtones of awe and fear. "You haven't just given us new technologies," they sang. "You've given us a new way of seeing reality itself. The Council's sciences are based on discovering how the universe works. Yours are based on deciding how it should work and making it comply." "That's actually a perfect way of putting it," Marcus agreed. "Though we've learned to be very careful about what we decide. The universe pushes back when you push too hard." As the day progressed, the initial fear and skepticism of the Council scientists gave way to something else: excitement. For the first time in centuries, they were confronted with truly new ideas, paradigms that challenged everything they knew. It was terrifying, yes, but also exhilarating. The bioengineers began sketching ways to apply consciousness-reality interface principles to medicine, potentially allowing healing by literally willing someone back to health. The physicists explored the implications of information-based reality for faster-than-light communication and travel. The engineers dreamed of structures that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, buildings that were bigger inside than out, ships that could be in several places at once. But it was the collective that raised the most profound question. If consciousness shapes reality, their unified voice resonated through the chamber. "And we accept your technologies. Won't we begin to reshape reality according to combined human council perspectives rather than human ones alone? Won't the universe itself change based on our collective beliefs about how it should work?" Marcus's smile widened. "Now you're beginning to understand why we really want to join the council. 10,000 species, each with unique perspectives on reality. Imagine what we could build together. Not just technologies, but entirely new ways for reality to function. We could create a universe that's richer, stranger, more wonderful than any single species could imagine alone." Dr. SYNN felt a shiver run through her bioluminescent form. The humans weren't just offering to share their power. They were offering to fundamentally transform the nature of existence itself, shaped by the collective imagination of all sapient species. "There is danger in this," she said carefully. "If reality becomes malleable, if consciousness can reshape existence, what happens when different groups have incompatible visions? Could we fragment reality itself?" "It's possible," Marcus admitted. "During our wars, we came close to doing exactly that. Different factions tried to impose their versions of how physics should work. The conflicts weren't just military, they were ontological. Reality itself became a battlefield." He gestured, and the displays showed more historical data. Zones where time flowed backwards because one faction believed in predestination. Regions where energy and matter were purely subjective because another faction embraced radical observer-dependent physics. The chaos had been unimaginable. "But we learned," Marcus continued. "We developed protocols, safeguards. Reality has an inherent stability, a preference for consistency. You can bend it, but it takes exponentially more effort to break it. And when multiple consciousnesses work together, their shared beliefs create a stronger, more stable framework than any individual could maintain. The Council itself, as a reality-stabilizing force, the Quell harmonized. Our diversity, not as a weakness, but as a strength, creating a more robust shared reality through our different perspectives finding common ground." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "That's why we need you as much as you might benefit from our knowledge. Humanity alone is too limited, too singular in perspective. We need the wisdom of species that have existed for eons, the logic of machine minds, the intuition of psychic races, the patience of beings who measure time in geological scales. Together, we can create a reality that serves all consciousness, not just the strongest or most aggressive." As the conference drew to a close, Dr. SYNN found herself changed. The universe she had thought she understood had revealed itself to be far more fluid, far more responsive to conscious will than she had ever imagined. It was terrifying. The power to reshape reality carried responsibilities beyond measure. But it was also the most exciting scientific prospect she had encountered in her long life. "We'll need time to process this," she told Marcus as the human delegation prepared to leave. "To verify your theories, to understand the implications." "Of course," Marcus replied. "We're not going anywhere. Take all the time you need. Question everything. Test every assumption. That's how we learned. by refusing to accept that anything was impossible until proven otherwise. As the humans vanished in their casual defiance of physics, Dr. SYNN turned to her colleagues. The debates would be fierce, she knew. Many would reject these paradigms out of fear or disbelief. But she could already see the light of possibility in too many eyes. The seeds had been planted. The council had gathered to decide whether to accept humanity. But what they really faced was a choice about the nature of reality itself. Would they remain in their comfortable, stable understanding of a fixed universe? Or would they embrace the terrifying freedom of a reality that could be shaped by conscious will? Looking at the equations still glowing in the air, at the small sphere of perfect matter Marcus had created from nothing and left as a gift, Dr. SYNN already knew her answer. The universe had suddenly become a far more interesting place than she had ever dreamed possible. And that, more than any weapon or technology, might be humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. The knowledge that impossible was just another word for not yet tried. The Grand Assembly had never been so divided. In 10,000 years of consensus building and careful deliberation, the Galactic Council had never faced a decision that cut so deeply to the heart of what they were and what they might become. As High Chancellor Vorix took his position at the center of the chamber, he could feel the weight of history pressing down upon him like a physical force. 6 weeks had passed since humanity's first contact. 6 weeks of demonstrations, debates, revelations, and soul-searching that had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. Now, finally, the time had come to vote. The chamber itself seemed to reflect the tension. Environmental controls fluctuated wildly as different species unconsciously broadcasted their anxiety. The temperature rose and fell, atmospheric composition shifted, and even the artificial gravity wavered as thousands of beings struggled with the magnitude of their decision. Vorix expanded his gaseous form, letting his bioluminescence pulse in calming patterns. Distinguished representatives, he began, his voice carrying across dimensions both physical and psychic, we gathered to make perhaps the most consequential decision in our council's history. Before us lies the formal application of humanity for full membership in the Galactic Council. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Over these past weeks, we have seen wonders and terrors in equal measure. We have witnessed technology that defies our understanding of physics. We have glimpsed a species that nearly destroyed itself, only to emerge with power that could reshape reality itself. We have heard promises of shared knowledge and mutual growth, and we have felt the fear of obsolescence and irrelevance. Around the chamber, representatives shifted, whispered, or sat in perfect stillness according to their species' ways of expressing tension. The factions that had emerged were clear in their positioning. The Integration Coalition, led by the Scythians and supported by many of the younger species, occupied the progressive arc of the spiral. The Sovereignty Guard, Fax's militaristic alliance, held the conservative positions. Between them, the vast majority waited, uncommitted, struggling with a decision that had no clear answer. Before we proceed to the vote, Vorix continued, I invoke the right of final testament. Any who wish to speak one last time may do so now. The first to rise was Ambassador Ishkar of the Morvac hegemony, one of the eldest member species. Their chitinous form had seen the rise and fall of stellar empires, and their words carried the weight of eons. I have lived for 12,000 years. Ishkar's translated thoughts resonated through the chamber. I have seen species rise from primitive toolmakers to spacefaring civilizations. I have watched the Council grow from a handful of worlds to the 10,000 we now represent. In all that time, I have never felt fear for our future. Until now. They paused, compound eyes surveying the assembly. The humans terrify me, not because they're evil or aggressive, but because they represent change on a scale we cannot comprehend. They offer us godhood, the power to reshape reality itself. But gods can fall, and when they do, the destruction is absolute. I vote against membership. Let humanity develop in isolation. Let us observe and learn from a distance. But do not invite the storm into our house. As Ishkar settled back, Platform 91 illuminated. The Scythian representative, Quila, flowed upward in a graceful spiral. My esteemed colleague speaks of fear. Quila's melodious voice rippled through the chamber. But, I ask you, when has fear ever led to wisdom? The humans exist. This is fact. They possess power beyond our current understanding. This too is fact. The question is not whether we can avoid change, but whether we help shape it. Quila's form shifted, displaying patterns of historical data. Consider our own history. When a Vorth discovered antimatter, did we ban them from the council? When the collective achieved true AI consciousness, did we exile them? No. We adapted. We grew. We became stronger for the diversity of our capabilities. Humanity offers us the next step in that evolution. They offer us extinction. Fax roared from his platform. Combat spines fully extended. You compare antimatter to the ability to delete star systems? You compare AI to consciousness that can rewrite the laws of physics? The human admiral herself admitted they nearly destroyed themselves with these powers. Why should we believe we can control what they barely could? Before anyone could respond, a new voice entered the discussion. Platform 412, rarely noticed in council proceedings, began to glow. The speaker was from the Zafrani, a minor species known more for philosophy than technology or military might. Perhaps, the Zafrani suggested in their whisper-soft voice, we are asking the wrong question. We debate whether we can control humanity, whether we can integrate them safely. But have we asked whether we have the right to make this choice at all? The chamber fell silent, uncertain where this was leading. Humanity has approached us in good faith, the Zafrani continued. They have revealed their capabilities, shared their knowledge, submitted to our procedures. They have, in essence, acknowledged our authority to judge them. If we reject them now, out of fear rather than principle, what does that say about us? What does that make the council but a cage try to contain anything that might threaten our comfortable superiority? The words stung because they carried truth. Several representatives who had been leaning toward rejection shifted uncomfortably, forced to examine their own motivations. High Chancellor Vorix recognized the next speaker, Dr. Keela Swynen, who had been working directly with the human scientists. Her appearance at the political assembly was unusual, but her insights had been deemed crucial. Honored representatives, Dr. Swynen began, her bioluminescent patterns more subdued than usual. I've spent weeks studying human science. What I have learned has shattered every assumption I held about the nature of reality. But, more importantly, I have learned something about humanity itself. She paused, ensuring she had everyone's attention. Their technology is not the product of superior intelligence or special insight. It is the product of desperation refined by conscience. They developed reality-warping weapons because they were trying to survive. But they developed reality-healing techniques because they were trying to deserve survival. Every terrifying capability they possess is matched by an equal commitment to using it responsibly. Their admiral threatens us with their power. Fax interrupted. Their admiral warns us of their power. Swynen corrected. There's a difference. They could have arrived in secret, infiltrated our systems, taken what they wanted. Instead, they announced themselves, revealed their capabilities, and asked for permission to join. That speaks to their character more than any treaty or promise. Platform 1 arose, the ancient Therians, whose species had been among the Council's founders. Elder Vosk spoke, their words carrying the weight of 10 millennia of leadership. The question before us is simple yet profound, Vosk intoned. Do we have more to fear from humanity as potential enemies or as allies? If we reject them, we create a power outside our influence, developing according to its own priorities. If we accept them, we at least have a voice in shaping their future, and ours. But at what cost? Platform 200 demanded. The speaker was from the Kelos Imperium, staunch allies of the Kellerants. If we accept them, we accept that military power means nothing. That economic leverage means nothing. That 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom means nothing before their ability to rewrite reality. We would become passengers in our own civilization. Or, counter the collective from their platform, we would become participants in a greater civilization than any we have imagined. The humans offer to teach us their technologies. In time, we would wield the same capabilities. The question is whether we trust ourselves with such power. The debate raged for hours more. Ancient alliances fractured as species took unexpected positions. The warrior castes, traditionally united, split between those who saw opportunity in human military technology and those who saw only obsolescence. The merchant guilds divided between those who feared economic disruption and those who salivated at the trading possibilities. Through it all, Admiral Chun watched from the observer's gallery. She had been invited to witness, but not participate in the final deliberation. Her expression remained neutral, but those who looked closely could see the tension in her bearing. Humanity's future, perhaps the galaxy's future, hung on the words being spoken below. As the debate wound down, Vorix called for the preliminary poll. Not yet the final vote, but a gauge of where the assembly stood. The results appeared in the air above the chamber. 3,847 in favor, 4,963 against, 1,190 abstaining. A slight majority against, but not the overwhelming rejection the hardliners had hoped for. More significantly, the number of abstentions indicated how many representatives remained genuinely uncertain. Before the final vote, Vorix announced, "I invoke my right as High Chancellor to address the Assembly." He descended from his neutral platform to stand in the center of the chamber, where traditionally only petitioners stood. The symbolism was not lost on the Assembly, their leader placing himself in the position of one asking for consideration. "My friends," Vorix began, abandoning the formal titles, "I have led this council for 1,000 years. I have seen us face crises that seemed insurmountable. Wars, plagues, the collapse of entire sectors of space. Each time, we survived because we adapted, because we chose hope over fear, unity over division." His form shifted, displaying his species' equivalent of vulnerability. Understand the fear. The humans represent a change so fundamental that nothing will ever be the same. But I ask you, has anything ever truly stayed the same? We tell ourselves we have maintained peace for 10 millennia, but how many times has that peace been tested? How many compromises have we made? How many threats have we absorbed or deflected? He paused, gathering himself. The humans are not just another threat to manage or another species to integrate. They are a mirror, showing us what we might become if we have the courage to evolve. Yes, they could destroy us, but they could also elevate us. The choice of which path they take depends largely on the choice we make today. I have made my decision. I vote for acceptance, with all the conditions and safeguards we have discussed. Not because I am without fear, but because I believe our fear should not define us. We are the Galactic Council. We have united 10,000 species in common cause. If we cannot find a way to unite with one more, even one as challenging as humanity, then what does that say about the principles we claim to uphold? The chamber erupted, not in anger, but in frenzied discussion. Vorix's words had shifted the momentum. Representatives huddled with their delegations, communicated with their homeworlds, searched their consciences for the right path. When order was restored and the final vote was called, the atmosphere was electric with possibility and dread in equal measure. All representatives will now cast their final vote, Vorix intoned. The question before us: shall humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, subject to the integration protocols and safeguard established by this assembly? One by one, the votes were cast. Ancient species weighed in alongside relative newcomers. Machine intelligences calculated probabilities, while psychic races consulted their collective unconscious. The tally updated in real time, hovering above the chamber like prophecy being written. The votes swung back and forth. First the progressives took a narrow lead, then the conservatives surged ahead. Species that had been allies for millennia voted differently. Others that had been rivals found common cause. As the final votes were cast, the chamber held its collective breath. The numbers stabilized, glowing with finality. 5,156 in favor. 4,734 against. 110 abstentions. A clear majority, but not the overwhelming mandate either side had hoped for. Humanity would join the Galactic Council, but they would enter a divided house, with nearly half the members having voted against them. The vote is concluded, Vorix announced, his voice heavy with the weight of history. Humanity's application for membership is accepted. May this decision lead us to a brighter future, and may wisdom guide us through the changes to come. In the observer's gallery, Admiral Chun allowed herself a small smile of relief. But her expression quickly returned to neutrality as she recognized the work ahead. Winning the vote was only the beginning. Now came the far harder task of proving the council had made the right choice. Below, representatives began to disperse, some in celebration, others in dismay. Alliances would need to be rebuilt, fears would need to be addressed, and somewhere in human space, 11 other Titan-class warships waited to learn whether they would be instruments of partnership or the guarantors of an uncertain peace. Commander Thax found himself standing beside the human observation gallery. He looked up at Admiral Chun, his expression unreadable. "You have won your place," he said simply. "Now you must earn it." Chun nodded respectfully. "We understand, Commander. We've learned the hard way that power without wisdom leads to destruction. We hope to benefit from the Council's wisdom, just as we hope our power can serve the Council's goals." "Pretty words," Thax replied, though without his usual hostility. "We shall see if your actions match them." As he walked away, Chun reflected on